Okay. Nice music. Sort of like what was on the radio. So, good afternoon, officially. I'm Robert Buxton, and thanks to Catherine for setting this up, organizing this. Before we get into the classical things, which I'll talk about and play, you know, it's the holiday season, so what I want to do is a fun improvisation, and I'll give you a formula for it, so I need your help, though. If you would please give me a Christmas or holiday tune that everybody knows, just anything generic, just a fun Christmas melody.
Jingle Bells.
Okay, Jingle Bells, perfect. And now I'm going to do Jingle Bells in the style of several classical composers. Perhaps very serious, dark ones might be funny as a contrast. But which classical composers would you like to hear Jingle Bells? Bach. Everybody wants to hear Bach these days. Okay. So,
Brahms.
Bach and then Brahms. Okay, yeah. Here's Bach. Bach is the hardest. I don't know. I don't think all of that sounded like Bach, but I tried to do it. And then someone said Brahms. Brahms. Okay, so let's have Jingle Bells in the style of Brahms, which is funny because I'm going to play a large piece by Brahms later, Book 2 of the Paganini Variations. Last time we met, I played you Book 1, I think. So I'll play you Book 2 now. So, Jingle Bells in the style of Brahms. Well, I've been doing this for a while as a silly, fun thing. And then as I started reading more about the history of classical music, that they would improvise all the time in the past, 200 years ago. And I thought, well, why not do something like this? Sometimes I do a more serious improvisation, I'll ask you to give me a mood or a subject or do that. So I think that improvisation, even if it doesn't always come out as I want it to, but that's kind of the point, right? Because it's improvised. It's the equivalent of taking a language that's not spoken and actually trying to speak it. And that's my goal, because otherwise classical music's just a museum piece. It shouldn't be. We should. So, but that's just a funny way to do it. So now I'm going to play the real program, which maybe I'll add some improvisation to sometimes, you know. But I do play everything different each time, that's for sure. So there is that feeling of the moment, you know. And what I'm going to play first is a piece by Gluck, who was an opera composer in Vienna in the 1760s. This is from his opera Orfeo, or Orpheus and Eurydice. It's the melody from that opera, famous melody. It's a mournful lament. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice is a famous ancient Greek myth. Eurydice dies, she goes to the underworld, and Orpheus follows her to save her there. He brings his lyre, L-Y-R-E, not L-I-A-R, different meaning. And he plays it for the gods of the underworld, pleads for them to let Eurydice come back to earth with him. Finally, Hades says, yes, she can go, but don't look back as you're going back. Have you heard this before in the Old Testament, Sodom and Gomorrah? There's the same line, don't look back. Unfortunately, Orpheus looks back at the last moment and Eurydice is sent back to the underworld. It's a tragic story. But in the opera, and this is the Age of Enlightenment, the time of Rousseau and Voltaire, so we can't end in such a dark, gloomy way. Cupid intervenes, and they let Eurydice come back to Earth, and everyone lives happily ever after. It's kind of a nice ending. But this is an excerpt from that opera, the melody, and the arrangement here for piano is by Scambati, Italian 19th century composer. There are many recordings of this piece. For instance, Sergei Rachmaninoff played this just unbelievably beautifully. There's violin recordings of this, Jascha Heifetz and Misha Elman playing it. So I've studied what they do. And here it is, the melody from Orpheus by Gluck, arranged by Scambati. And you know, I forgot to mention the original is not sung, actually. It's from the opera, but it's played on a flute and accompanied by strings. And I always tell people this. Some people will tell me, I'll hear this phrase a lot, you know, classical music just seems too distant and I don't really understand it. My answer to that is try to connect something personal to it. And in other words, the people who wrote this music, you know, they were people. And people, even 300 years ago, they're not that different from now. Maybe they wore different clothes and ate different food, but people not really that different. And if you've ever experienced loss, which unfortunately I think everyone has, well, then you get this piece. It's that simple, I believe. So anyway, now I'm going to play a piece by Robert Schumann. It's actually one of his arrangements of Paganini Caprice. Last time I was here, I played you a couple other, you know, parts of it. You know, Schumann did 12 arrangements of Paganini Caprices. So he arranged half of the 24 Caprices for violin. He adapted them for the piano. This one is relatively new for me, so I didn't play it for you in the summer, whenever it was we met last. What happens with these 12 arrangements is the first few sound very close to the original Paganini. He didn't change much. But in this, you don't hear much Paganini. It's Schumann, it's him. And these were early works of his. Schumann did these in the 1830s. My theory is that he, in arranging Paganini, he found his own voice. Just like if an art student goes to a museum and copies a painting, well, they find their own voice or their own style in the process of imitating. That's what I think. So Paganini was like a rock star of this time period, turn of the century, 18th into the 19th centuries. People either loved him or hated him. And obviously Schumann and Liszt and others, they adored him. Now, here's the story about Robert Schumann. He was born in 1810, and he was very much not a child prodigy. You know, he wanted to be a novelist first, and that didn't quite pan out. Then he wanted to be a virtuoso pianist. He had not been a child prodigy, I mentioned, so he practiced like crazy. He wrote these pieces, they're tricky. And he got some kind of a device meant to strengthen the pinky finger, but in using it, he actually damaged his hands. So that didn't work either. And then he finally devoted himself to composition. And add to that, he suffered from bipolar disorder, or what we would consider bipolar disorder. And they didn't have the knowledge or the treatment for it at that time. So his life was incredibly difficult as a result. He suffered quite a bit. And in a way, you can kind of hear it in his music, at least in this piece you can hear it. There's a feeling of tragedy. But there's also something that's very special with Schumann, is sudden character changes. Maybe that has to do with his bipolar, you know, one mood, another mood. It's like a movie where you have spliced scenes. It's always like that. Actually, one musician, a pianist, I forgot who it was, they accused Schumann of this. They said Schumann's music is like shish kebab. You know, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Well, shish kebab is great, and isn't that the point, that it's just fragments of things? But the other reason Schumann likes to write fragments is because of the literature he liked. His favorite writers at the time wrote these fantasy novellas. E.T.A. Hoffmann is an example. He wrote The Nutcracker, you know. And that's how that literature works. It doesn't have one storyline that just goes, no, it has one story, another, and it's just boom, 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 all over the place. That's Schumann's music. So this is one of the Paganini Caprices arranged for piano by Schumann, but I don't hear Paganini. I hear Schumann 99%, so here it is.
And shoot, a lot of yeah, exactly. You're right, because it's imitating the violin. I mean, it's a violin piece originally. Schumann he's hard to get, but once it's same with Brahms, who I'm going to play next. It's not always easy listening. Actually, today's mostly not easy listening, and then at the end, I'm going to play you a bunch of fun Christmas things. So if this is not your cup of tea, just stick around. But I'll tell you a quick short story about Schumann. I don't know if I told this last time. It's kind of a terrible story, but it illustrates something I think essential about Schumann's music, about his style. So the pianist Walter Gieseking, he was a French-born German pianist, lived a long time ago, and he was not a great person by any means. He actually wrote a book about how to practice the piano completely in your mind without touching the piano. And a little bit of that goes a long way. But I read his book one summer and tried to do that, and I almost lost my mind. But so he was also, I later found out, I think he even joined the Nazi party, so really not a really awful person. And there's a story that in the 1950s he was giving a master class, a public lesson, to some young students. And a young boy about 11 years old was playing some Schumann. And this would never fly today, thank goodness, and it shows you what a nasty person he was. But this is the story. Walter Gieseking stopped the student and he said, I want you to start playing again, and whatever happens, whatever I say or do not stop. Fine. So the kid starts playing, and Walter Gieseking walks around the piano and he starts shouting the nastiest insults at him while he's playing. And finally, when the boy is done, when he was done, he was crying. Walter Gieseking sat down and smiled, and he said, good, now you're in the right mindset to understand Schumann's music. It's a horrible way to get his point across. But that is what Schumann is like. So next I'm going to play Brahms, the second book of Paganini Variations. And this fits perfectly. There's a segue from Schumann to Brahms. Because the young Brahms, born in Hamburg in 1833, he showed up at the Schumann's doorstep. You know, Clara Schumann herself was a great musician, composer, pianist, everything. Young Brahms knocked on their door, just said, I'm a young composer looking for some advice. And the Schumanns invited him in, he played some music, and they said, why don't you just live with us? They just practically adopted him. Clara was pregnant with their 7th child at the time, and it was not long after this that Robert Schumann, he tried to jump into the icy Rhine River. And he was institutionalized, and he died at the age of, I think, 47 or 48. Unspeakable. And Brahms was actually helping the Schumann family out through all of this. Now, there is this kind of myth or rumor that comes about at this time that there was a love triangle between Brahms, Clara Schumann, 20 years older than him, and Robert. So from what I've read, historians say probably not. They say the lives of the great composers, generally speaking, was a lot more boring than that. There was a movie in the late 40s made about this, and Katharine Hepburn played Clara Schumann. I haven't seen it, and I'd love to see it. It sounds like a great movie. But what makes for great Hollywood is not necessarily good history. What definitely was there was some unrequited or unresolved feelings that the two had for each other, Brahms and Clara. And it seems pretty doubtful that they had that they dated or anything. I don't think so. But Brahms was a loner for his whole life, and he would write these letters to Clara, first of all seeking her musical advice, but also just on a personal level. And you just feel there's something that's there, but he can't quite say it, And I think his music is like that too. I really do. I think, to me, Brahms, he's like a prickly pear. And this also it's not just his feelings towards Clara, but I think it's also where he was from. He was from Hamburg. And Hamburg is a city in the far north. And it's not famous for its residents showing a lot of emotion, I was talking to a lady, her husband was from Hamburg, and she said they went to a family reunion. There were two sisters. One had lived on one side of the Berlin Wall, another on the other. They'd left Hamburg, And they were getting together for the first time in decades. You know how they greeted each other? You think they hugged and cried? No. They're from Hamburg. This is what they did. 30 or 40 years they hadn't seen each other. They did this. That's it. No, not even. And that's not to say that there's no emotion. It's the opposite. The emotion is here. It's just that culturally they don't show. It's just cultural differences. And I think Brahms is like that. And his music can be like that. Another story about that, and then I'll play the piece. Tchaikovsky and Brahms lived at the same time, roughly. And they hated each other, mostly. Tchaikovsky said Brahms's music was like dried up, dusty, old-fashioned stuff. And Brahms, truthfully, he loved the past. He was almost like a scholar of Renaissance music. And Brahms didn't write these melodies like Tchaikovsky did that hook you, that catch you. He just didn't. Maybe the lullaby, but even that's not really a melody, it's more of a motif. It's just... It should be quieter. That was a little aggressive for a lullaby. But anyway, but Brahms responded to Tchaikovsky by saying that passion without discipline and craft is like a dead reed floating around in the wind. I love the creative insults, okay? So they ended up meeting and having a few drinks. One detail, unfortunately, they were both very fond of alcohol. After 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 drinks, Brahms and Tchaikovsky became very friendly, and they suddenly liked each other, and they stopped quarreling. Isn't that nice? I don't recommend binge drinking, but it's just nice that they made peace. So last time I played you book 1. This is book 2 of the Paganini Variations, based on the 24th Caprice of Paganini. The famous theme. Book 1 rather, is very heavy. It's like a tank, it's just, wow. Book 2 is a little more subtle. It's a little more melancholy. It's a little more, it has Brahms's nostalgia there, maybe some of his feelings. This is one of the variations. How did he derive that from the energetic Paganini? I don't know, but that's what he did. It's genius. And here's another one. Brahms's music, to me, there's always a feeling of maybe a little regret or something. it's something there that the words, you can't really find the words for it, but you feel it. Initially, Brahms wrote these pieces as finger exercises because they're very hard. You might even hear some wrong notes, yeah, because you know what? They're impossible, they're crazy, technically. But he liked how they sounded, and he just turned it into this set of variations. So I don't call them exercises, I call them finger torture. And there's a part in the first book that's like, in practicing that, I developed a pain in this finger. This never happened to me before, and it shouldn't happen. And I went to the orthopedist, and they said, "What's causing you pain?" I said, "Brahms." So that may have been a first. You know, another quick Brahms story, you might picture how he looked. He had this big beard. He looked like Santa Claus. That's the connection with Christmas. No connection with he couldn't grow a beard until he was 40-something. So actually, when he lived in the Schumann's house, you see a photo of him from the 1850s. He looked like an angelic boy, basically. He had no beard, you know. So my family and I, we were driving through South Carolina, and we were at a rest stop or gas station, I don't know. And there was this guy on a Harley Davidson motorcycle. And I looked at him, and he had this big white beard, and he looked exactly like Brahms. I mean, I thought it was Brahms reincarnated. He's obviously just wearing Harley Davidson, you know, attire. It's a little different from Brahms. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go tell him how much he looks like Brahms. I start walking over there, and I feel a yank. And it's my wife pulling, she said, "Don't do it. You're not going to get the reaction that you expect, I don't think." So here's Brahms' Paganini Variations, Book 2. It's heavy, and trick. I mean, just ridiculous for the hands. And now I'm going to play a piece that you may not like at all, but I think I'm going to. If I explain the context, I think it'll make sense. And it's a style that maybe I wouldn't always listen to in the car, sometimes. And it's a piece by Ludosławski, who was a Polish 20th century composer. He wrote this in Warsaw in 1941, so right in the middle of the war. And Ludosławski's style, he's quite avant-garde. He was a modernist composer, like abstract painters. So you have to see how comfortable you are with things like this. You're going to hear things like that. Now, the reason that the music sounds like this, because I thought about this, and when I used to teach, I would assign 20th century, 21st century pieces, and students initially would say, I don't like it. After they played a piece in that style, they would all come to appreciate it. And the reason is because, frankly, the 20th century had so many horrors in it. And here's the story of Ludosławski when he wrote this piece. He was an officer in the Polish army, and the Polish army was all but completely collapsed. You had the Soviets over here and the Nazis over here. And actually his brother was captured, I think by the Nazis, and he was killed on the spot. So Ludosławski saw nothing but certain death, and he just walked back to Warsaw. Now, had he been Jewish, it would have been much worse for him, obviously. But he lived in Warsaw for a few years there, and there was no money. There was hardly enough to eat. And to make a living, he organized these concerts with his fellow composer, Andrzej Panufnik. And they would do 2 piano concerts in bars. A lot of the music they played was popular music, American jazz and other things. But some of the concerts were illegal. In other words, that kind of 20th century dissonant music I showed you, I'll tell you something. For both the Nazis and later, yes, the Soviets, that style of music was banned because it's not conformist. Anything different is not allowed in those totalitarian, regimes. So at one such concert that was not quite legal, late at night, Ludosławski and Panufnik were playing, and the SS walked in. And they came to the 2 pianists, they stopped them, and they put pistols to their head, and they said, this concert is illegal, this gathering is illegal, and we're going to shoot you right now. The owner of the bar came out, and he said, no, these are my employees, leave them alone. They were not his employees. Saved their life that moment. Now, Warsaw then fell shortly after that, and Ludosławski had to leave with only what he could carry. And the only sheet music that he could carry with him was this piece I'm going to play, the variations on theme by Paganini, which he played in those bars with Panufnik. So it's a 2-piano piece, and he later made it into a piano concerto for piano and orchestra in 1978. I have adapted it for 1 piano, and it's a little bit crazy doing it on 1 piano. So bear with me. It's still a work in progress. It's based on the same exact Paganini as the Brahms. So in the middle of the Second World War, this music was still living and still does today. So, and think about what Ludosławski must have felt. I can't even imagine when he wrote this. When I was learning this, I thought I would get headaches. I thought I was losing it. But I would always remind myself, it's not even close to what he must have felt like with what he went through during the war. So, in short, that's why a lot of the 20th century music sounds the way it does. How could you write something pretty and romantic when there's rubble and bombs falling all around you? I don't see it. So, yeah, good luck. It's not easy listening, but I give you some context. And see, this is an interesting thing. Even if the music is abrasive, and it is abrasive, it's supposed to be, think imagery. What kind of imagery comes up? Don't think too hard about it, but let it happen. And I've heard very interesting things from people about this piece, what it conjures up for them. So here it is, and it's again, it's kind of new for me, and I had to write. It's my own arrangement, so yeah, okay. It's
I think he had some anger.
well, I wasn't, but writing that in the middle of the war in Warsaw, of course it sounds like that.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going to close the classical part. I think I may have done this last time I was here. The excerpt of Rachmaninoff's Paganini Rhapsody. It's almost like a theme today. Not everything was Paganini, but most of it was. And Rachmaninoff's Paganini Rhapsody from the 1930s. By the way, Rachmaninoff did not adopt a modernist style like this. He just didn't. He kept his romanticism, into the 20th century. And he takes this, and in the 18th variation, he actually turns it upside down. And this is what you get if you turn. You get this. Ever heard that? Exactly, which I just saw. Because everyone was telling me you have to see that movie, Somewhere in Time. And that's the theme of that movie.
You know the name of the movie?
Somewhere in Time.
Okay.
That's it.
Jane Seymour.
Jane Seymour and Christopher Reeve. And it's actually free on YouTube right now. So maybe after this, it's a great movie. And by the way, if you like YouTube, I put a lot of my stuff on YouTube, just saying. But seriously, watch that movie if you have a chance. And it has this music in it.
Catherine Hepburn in it?
No, it's from 1980. She was acting in, I saw one with her in 1980 something. But it's, Somewhere in Time, Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour. And this movie, it's a great movie because it's about time travel, about imaginary, he self-hypnotizes. And I was thinking about this, when we talk about classical music or when we listen or play it, isn't that kind of what we're doing? Self-hypnotizing and trying to go to the past? That sounds a little crazy, but it is a good movie, even if the idea is a little crazy. Rachmaninoff wrote this in the 1930s after he'd left Russia for good. He left when the revolution happened, and he just never got over his longing for his homeland. And I think that's what this music's about. And even if you didn't have to leave a country like Russia and never go back, my mother did, she left the Soviet Union and never went back. But we all can relate to this because you can't go home again. That's a book by Thomas Wolfe. You can't go home again because home is a time, not a place. Even if you grew up in Raleigh, 2 blocks away, it ain't the same. It just can't be. And when I visited the place I grew up over the summer, well, this music made a lot more sense to me because I got it in a way. It was like, that, even though I didn't leave Russia, I left, New Jersey, don't tell anyone. But I had that, so here's Rachmaninoff. Well, I'm going to play now several Christmas songs. Here is a great spiritual that I love, Go Tell It on the Mountain. James Baldwin, one of his great novels, autobiographical novels, is called Go Tell It on the Mountain. So here it is. I'm sorry?
When did you teach?
I taught well, a long time. I taught for about 7 or 8, I don't even know, a lot of years in universities too. And I'm having more fun doing this, but yeah, I used to teach a lot, and I don't teach at all anymore. So here is "Oh Holy Night." So I'm gonna at least the second time through, I'm gonna add some things. At first, I play it more straightforward, and then I add some curls and twists and things. So. A couple more. Here's a gospel.
How do you last through all that?
Oh, you try to relax and not think too much. It's like driving, you know. So now here's Jesus, oh what a wonderful child. It's a little bit new for me, but I'm working on it, so it's short. I'll do a little improvisation on it. So. I'll do one more. This is just a lot of fun. Stride piano version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town in the style of Dave Brubeck, who I love. So here it is. Hey, thank you very much. Oh no, I went over, but sorry. Thank you for having me, and
I got to remind you.
yeah. I have this, but I never. It was actually upside down, so I thought, oh yeah, we're good. Okay.
We wanted you to.
Well, thank you. Play what? Wait a minute, wait.
Oh, that's all right.
It's not coming. I know the song, but it's not like registering and oh yeah. Maybe next time. Sorry.